Oh, Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster, otherwise known as Ebirah, Horror of the Deep. Hey there, I'm your host, Glenn Destruction, and we're back diving into another Godzilla movie. This movie, I said at the end of my last review, I have a lot of attachments to. And this movie right here, I have a little story to tell because actually it is my first ever Godzilla movie that I owned on VHS way back in the day. So this movie, my earliest memories with it go way back to about maybe 96 or 97. I was at Walmart with my grandpa and grandma, and they had two different Godzilla movies that were on sale. One of them was King Kong vs. Godzilla, and the other one was Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster. Now, obviously, you know, if you watched my review of King Kong vs. Godzilla, that I did not like that movie as a kid. But Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster was completely unexplored to me. I had no idea what to expect, and this movie became my first ever VHS that I ever owned. For myself, first ever Godzilla, and there is a lot of nostalgia and a lot of memories just held within this release right here. And it has been one of the VHSs I've held on to for years and will continue to because, again, like I said, it is special to my childhood and it's the first ever VHS that I ever owned for myself. You'd be absolutely amazed if I told you about how much I was into this movie. I really believed I was a part of this movie watching it as a kid. I get told this story over and over by my older brother. So basically, he was walking past my bedroom and the door was open, and the scene where they're dancing around during the dancing marathon going on, I was dancing around to it. I was that much into this movie to where I really felt like I was in it with the characters and the storyline going on. And it's amazing in retrospect because this movie isn't like a brilliant Godzilla movie. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. It's just, as a kid, it was just very likable to me. So as things stand currently with this movie, I have two different versions of it. The VHS version, which is the Good Times home video release, and then the Kraken release. Okay, so both versions obviously the same movie, but they're very different. This version, I prefer the dubbing on it. The only thing is, though, there is less context due to the fact in the beginning, you just see a boat out in sea, and basically Ebirah's claw comes up and attacks. That's basically it right there. So it opens up very quick, and there's a less context, but this one, though, this 5 minutes of footage that I do not recall even being on the Good Times version release. And this version, I do think, as far as the context, and when you know what's going on, I feel like everything is there as was intended. So I feel like this is one of those chopped up variations that was kind of just released here in the United States. But this version definitely is what the movie was intended to be. It's just, the only thing I don't like is the English dubbing is so over the top, and it's kind of like a turn off at certain points. Also, though, I did notice they put over the soundtrack, the crazy surfer vibes during the battle with Godzilla and the jets. That was on this right here. This version, though, however, that is removed, though, I noticed that. I do like the music. I don't like that they cut that out on this version right here. So if basically this one's dubbing could be on this one, it'd be perfect. Overall, though, this is the only version that I watched this day due to the fact that I do not have a VHS player, and if you were alive during the time when VHS players were a thing, the more you fast forwarded them, the more you rewound them, ejected them. Also, the VHS players were prone to eating them and just taking the tape. Yeah, I really don't want to go through that with this movie. I just want to kind of preserve it as it is, basically. So it's been retired from being watched overall, and for good. So now the next question, how has this movie aged? Is it still top-notch? Is it a Godzilla GOAT movie, or has it slid backwards? Well, I'll be brutally honest with you. And if I was going to lie to you guys and tell you everything was perfect about these movies, I would not be doing these reviews, because I want to give it to you bluntly. But Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster is basically like a filler episode on a TV series. It doesn't really have no real importance to the overall plot in the show era. It just kind of is there, you know. It reminds me of those TV series where you get done with this huge, massive angle, and you gotta kind of slow it down a little bit, you know, with an episode that gives the viewers a chance to breathe a little bit. So that is how I like to compare this movie. I could go surely based off nostalgia and just say it's absolutely amazing, but the thing is, though, I don't feel like that backs up a lot, though, when it comes to this movie, though. It's just overall a lot weaker. It's very straightforward. The kaiju cast in it, too, you know, it doesn't follow up, say, how we had Anguirus, we had King Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra, and even King Kong in the last few movies. Ebirah and the Giant Condor, I'm sorry, just does not exactly follow up as well. And it does have Mothra in it. She does not have as much screen time as you would hope, but she's in it, though. I want to roll back and talk about King Kong while he's still in my mind real quick. So here's the deal. King Kong was intended for this movie. It was supposed to be King Kong versus Ebirah. But the thing is that he was dropped from the movie and Godzilla was just slipped right in. And it works, but the thing is that a lot of the traits of King Kong are still in this movie very much. So Godzilla, if you notice, is powered by electricity. Godzilla was never shown to ever be powered by electricity in the past movies. In fact, it really just pissed him off. but King Kong, we all remember, was in King Kong vs. Godzilla, and that was part of how he got the upper hand on Godzilla and was able to fight back. Another thing, this also explains why Godzilla has some interest in Dio, which honestly, I don't blame Godzilla, script or not. I gotta say, this is probably one of my first ever crushes that I ever had in a movie as a kid. So yeah, Godzilla, I understand your interest in her. And yeah, Mothra is part of this movie, like I said. She doesn't have very much screen time in this movie. In fact, for the most part in this movie, she's just resting and being worshipped. Though she shows up during the pivotal ending of this movie and saves everybody from the impending explosion. Also, it doesn't stop Mothra and Godzilla from not getting into it, because even though Godzilla is the good guy, he doesn't stop and hold himself back from being a jackass in the movie. Like, seriously, Godzilla. I mean, yeah, I know you're upset that you got clapped by this Mothra when it was a larva and this deceased sibling, but let it go. Let it go. Don't get embarrassed one more time, but you're gonna get embarrassed. Also featured in this movie is Rodan on a budget, the giant condor. This monster I always forget about. It's barely a kaiju, I do want to say, but I only remember it due to the fact that every Thanksgiving there'll be that one guy on Thanksgiving sharing that giant condor meme of a roasted condor, and it says Happy Thanksgiving. Other than that, this monster just makes a complete one-off appearance. You never see it again, with the exception of the fact that you will see it in Godzilla's Revenge when we visit that just a giant stock footage fest. That's all that movie basically is. That movie I'll roast another time, just as much as Godzilla roasted the giant condor. So this movie kind of takes the UFOs and the aliens and just kind of puts them to the side for the time being. And now we have an evil terrorist organization known as the Red Bamboo. So basically these guys are taking the natives from Infant Island and forcing them to work. They're slaving away, producing this yellow liquid, which is basically part of how the Red Bamboo is just going back and forth navigating with their ship safely. So yeah, they're definitely just dastardly and evil, and on top of that they're just producing nuclear weapons, manufacturing them. This is probably the only movie they appear in. I do not think that I've even seen them in a comic book series. If they have been in a comic book series outside this movie, do let me know in the comment section. As far as I know, they're one-offs, and I don't mind them for what it's worth in this movie. Just, they feel like James Bond villains, though, for the most part. And it's one of those things that I definitely gotta say, the leader of the Red Bamboo, I preferred his vocals on the VHS version so much more because it's less tolerable on the Kraken release. I do want to throw that out there. That's probably one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to voiceovers, that the main leader of the Red Bamboo just was a lot more intimidating based on the voice that he had in the VHS version that I watched. So this movie has its very distinctive differences. I'm going to go ahead and say 80%, no, let's bump that to 90% possibly, if this movie takes place on the island. Like, after a certain point, once the ship sets sail, you are never coming back to the city. Like, it is out there on an island. And I kind of like it because there's a lot of cool, just great shots of the boat just sailing. You have the scene where Ebirah's claws coming out of the ground, and it's raining, and the music, oh my god, the music is amazing in this movie. It definitely doesn't have any of the classic bits in the movie, you know, say like the Godzilla March theme song, but it has this crazy surfer rock 1960s, 70s type sound. Some of it kind of sounds like a Tom and Jerry cartoon at points, also at points just very cartoony. And then other bits of it kind of make me think of a James Bond movie. It's just really out there and all over the place with the soundtrack, and just very different, and probably the most different soundtrack of all time of a typical Godzilla movie. And do not sleep on the scene where Godzilla is fighting the jets, because the soundtrack and the music is just brilliant. I mean, it's one of those things I can't get over. Like I said, it was not on the Good Times release of the movie. It was on the Kraken release. And maybe it was in the original when the movie came out and just was cut out of the US version eventually. Let me know in the comment section. I'm really just genuinely curious about that, to be honest. But like I said, that scene is just amazing. So let's talk about this movie's colorful storyline that it has. It's very straightforward. I mean, really, there's not a lot of complex things to it. So this movie, it begins, you have Yata and his brother is basically just separated from him at sea. And what happens is our group of characters are trying to obtain a boat so they can set sail and try to find him. They end up getting a boat, stealing a boat, should I say, altogether. It sounds like a crazy Friday night after this dancing marathon that they all fail. And they get the boat, they get attacked by Ebirah, they're marooned on an island, they get captured and chased around by the Red Bamboo, Godzilla is found, and that is pretty well it. I mean, really, after a certain point, it's okay, we've found everybody, we're reunited, we need to get off this island, but we need to get around the Red Bamboo, and Godzilla is their key for doing it, for throwing off the Red Bamboos. plans overall. Ebirah and Godzilla battled out. I love their crazy little volleyball scene that they have in it. Mothra shows up for the save. Like I said, this is very straightforward. There's not a lot to it. In fact, this is one of the shortest Godzilla movies I have seen at this point, I believe. I think like 88 minutes is all it is. It just really feels like as fast as it starts, it ends. I mean, so there's not a whole lot to it. It's just a fun movie, though, for what it's worth, though, even though it's very spontaneous, which is probably the best word to describe this movie. Like I said, this is a very straightforward Godzilla movie. It does feel like a side quest for Godzilla, but it's a welcome one. This movie may not be top-notch like some of the other Godzilla movies, but for what it's worth, though, it is a welcome movie to me, and just pure nostalgia. Because of that, though, that's why I'm not putting this movie over too much, because of the fact I do not believe everybody's going to see it from my point of view, just because of the fact that they weren't seeing this movie the same way that I saw. A lot of my personal opinions are based on just personal childhood attachments. Not everybody's going to have that. They probably saw this movie at different points in their life. But for me, though, I'm just glad my VHS copy has survived, and I find it funny also, when I look at this movie, for whatever reason, it was a big flex for me to go ahead and put my name on this VHS to let people know that this is my copy, and it's going to be my copy till the end of my time. So, go ahead and check this movie out if you wish. There are better top-notch Godzilla movies than Godzilla vs. the Sea Monster or Ebirah Horror of the Deep, whatever you want to call it. It's just that this is one of those, I'd say, like, if you want a little fun, go for it. The next movie, though, we'll be talking about will be the movie that was the last VHS, or DVD, I should say. The last DVD that I ever owned of a Godzilla movie, and that would be Son of Godzilla. So we're going to be on polar opposites as far as views when it comes to Son of Godzilla, which I saw in my adulthood when I was maybe like 23 years old, and in this movie when I saw when I was like 6 years old. So stay tuned.